Welcome to my YouTube channel and to my train room. For this week's offering, I'm going to publish the second of the how-to videos I recorded during my last stint in California. This week's subject, modelling water. I've used several different products over the years. I'll discuss them in a little bit more detail in the description below. So if there's something that you need to know and I don't say it in the video, start by reading the description, and if it's still not there, feel free to ask. On the California layout, there are currently 3 areas of water requiring my attention. There's a small mountain stream, a much larger stream with a log pond, and a fairly decent sized lake. So without further ado, let's go back to California and model some water. This evening James has asked me to make a video of pouring water. I have the stream here, I have this mountain lake, it's quite a large area, and then over the other side of the room, if I pan around, on the peninsula where I first started work, there is another stream with a log pond. I got the logs in today. Anyway, I'm going to be using this Parks Super Glaze Ultra Gloss Epoxy. I've never tried this product before, but I'm told it's the same as Envirotex Light, just a different brand name. I don't have anywhere near enough here. For one thing, this package is only half full. So I'm barely going to be able to cover the lake bed. I think I'll start with the streams, and whatever I have left over I'll put in the lake, and I doubt it'll even cover the gravel bottom. So let's get set up and I will check in with you in a few minutes. I'm going to start with this mountain stream. I built a dam out of masking tape, and just in case it gets too deep and flows over, I've masked off the fascia all the way to the bottom so I can put a bucket on the floor just in case I get anything coming over there, even though I'm not planning on doing that. I've mixed the resin up for about 5 minutes. Now I'm going to start pouring at the top of the stream, and I'm going to let it run down by gravity and find its own level. That way I don't end up with resin where there shouldn't be any water. Just let that run down a little bit. It's moving pretty slowly, a lot slower than I'm used to with the Envirotex. What I don't want to do is put too much on here and have it run well up the bank. And it's going to do that if I'm not careful. So I'm cheating a little bit, and I'm pouring the resin on top of where it's already run. I've got a log dam coming up. I want to make sure I don't put any water on top of the log. And there's a rock right there which might want to protrude above the surface, so I'm not going to pour on top of it. I'll let the resin run around the outsides. So I might already have enough resin in there, so I'm not going to put any more in. I'm just going to have to be patient and let it run down. If I bring the camera around, we can see that the stream bed has been filled all the way down to around 4 inches from the bottom, and it's still gradually creeping its way down. So hopefully I've got the right amount of resin in there to get all the way to the bottom, but without overflowing my tape dam. So I'm going to leave that side for now, and I'm going to move over to the lake. Once again, I'm going to start pouring at the top of the stream and let it all run into the lake. Since it has a fairly slow drying time, I am going to turn the camera off and I'm going to wait, see how far that reaches before I pour the rest of it. So don't go away, I'll be right back. Well, I've left it about 15 minutes, and I don't know how well you can see through the lens of the camera, but the resin has almost reached the tape. It's about an inch back at the moment, so I'm going to assume that it's going to reach there and then put all the rest of the resin in the lake bed. Well, it's been another 15 minutes and my tape dam is filling up quite nicely at the moment. I've put a bucket on the floor to catch any drips. Also, I put brown paper in the bucket because it's my mixing bucket and I want to know if anything dripped. Whereas I won't be able to tell if it's in the bottom of the bucket. I will tell if it's on the brown paper. There's the stream, looking quite nice. Of course, only time will tell what it looks like in the morning. Well, it's taken about an hour, but as you can see, the resin has overflowed the dam, it's run all the way down the tape, and is starting to drip into the bucket. On the lake side, the resin is now about 4 inches past the culvert at the front, although at the back it hasn't progressed more than about half an inch in the last hour. So I guess it's not going to go very far there. Maybe I have a high spot in the gravel, but that won't matter. It's going to get at least 2 more layers after this anyway. Well, I now have plenty more resin, so I'm going to continue where I left off before. If you look here, the previous pour didn't reach very far. I got a few inches past the culvert, and just as far as here on the back, it covered maybe a quarter of the area of the lake. So I'm going to have to make another pour to cover the rest of it without going over this, and then I'll come back and do a whole second layer over everything. If I try to fill in this and cover this in the same pour, I'm going to end up with a step here because there'll be different amounts of shrinkage in the thick to the thin layers. Well, I've mixed up my resin. I've mixed the entire quart this time. Now hopefully I've distributed that about right, and that it'll cover everything this time. Now for the log pond, I am going to use a slightly different technique. The boss wants the water somewhat murkier, so I'm going to tint the resin with some brown paint. This time I didn't mix a whole batch. I put in approximately a quarter of each bottle. Putting a drop of paint in will be way too much, so instead just get a toothpick or a skewer, dip it in the paint, and then use that to stir the resin with. So there's only the barest trace of paint in there. So once I've mixed that in thoroughly, it should give me some tint. When stirring, it is important to scrape the sides and bottom of the container regularly to ensure that everything gets mixed in. You don't want to leave any of one part on the container because that will affect the proportions of the mix. Since the middle of the log pond is choked with logs, I'm going to pour some at each end. I think I'm going to put 2/3 of it at this end, or maybe 3/4 at this end and a quarter here,
it will gradually work its way in between the logs, but I don't want too much of it to come off this fall at the front. Something else I can do to help the spread of the resin is to drag it into different areas that it's not reaching of its own accord, using the end of the stick, because once the surface area has been wetted, it will find it a lot easier to level itself than to work its way over dry areas. And now for the tight areas that stirring stick won't reach, I have a little piece of strip wood which I'm going to use to go in between all the logs. So you get the idea. Once again, I am not going to do all of it with the camera in place because of the chance of knocking it off. Well, it was a little tedious getting the resin in between all the logs, but eventually I managed it with the help of the strip wood I showed you earlier, and with a piece of flat styrene, and where that wouldn't reach, just the end of a bamboo skewer. I think I'm going to mix another batch the same size and do the upper part of the stream. Actually, maybe slightly more in that batch, and it will run down the rapids area. Well, this morning's pour covered the entire lake area nicely, except for a little bit here. It stopped about an inch short of the fascia. It got far enough in there, even though I expected it to get further. That doesn't matter. I've still got to add one more layer over the entire area. I have a slight ridge here where the two pours didn't meet perfectly, but the one final layer will fix that properly. I don't have enough of a lip along here to catch it, so I'm going to make a dam. So let me do that before I start mixing resin. One piece of blue masking tape is usually sufficient as long as it's well stuck. It only needs to come an 1/8 of an inch higher than what I've got right now, and I've got it way higher, so it's not even going to come close to the top of that. Now, one entire box covered about 3/4 of the lake area to a satisfactory depth. So to cover the entire area, I'm going to do 1 1/3 boxes or thereabouts. And also the boss wants a little bit of blue paint in it, so I will add that. I'm using a clean mixing bucket because although they say you can recoat after 8 hours, my previous bucket was still tacky, so I don't want to risk a problem there. And I have a new stirring stick as well. I'm going to try that much paint. And I can barely see the blue in it. Alright, and that is all I'm going to put in. And now I've got to mix it until the blue is uniformly distributed. I think that is uniformly mixed now. I just scrape the sides and the bottom one more time. Got some in there. I want some in here. And I want some in the front. I want to pour a little bit down the back of that culvert so that it comes through from the back. And I want to pour some more down the stream from the top. It shouldn't really matter where it goes. I'm just helping the leveling process along. Before signing off on this water project, I'm going to draw your attention to something else. I managed to get a single drip of resin on my bridge right here. It looks a little unsightly and it's going to be virtually impossible to scrape it off. So what I'm going to do is make a mask out of a sheet of brown paper. I've cut a dime-sized hole in the middle of it. Just position it over the drip and get a can of black spray paint, and that's all it will take. Once that dries, that will dry to about the same colour as the rest of the bridge and it will no longer be as visible.